Welcome to OSD Daily. Casey Porter here alongside Chase Whitwiska as we bring you our podcast each and every week. And this week, we don't have near as good a news that we've had in the last about a month and a half. Oklahoma State went to Florida. They went in the rain, and they just got their asses kicked all over the field by UCF. They were the Citronites Saturday, but usually the Knights. I learned this week they actually eliminated the Golden Knights for their name. They're just the Knights now. So, hey, Chase, 45-3. Where to start?
Man, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty at all. If you've watched our previous podcast, I've mentioned UCF many times prior to this week, and talking about athletic ability and quickness and speed, and their quarterback, who they just got back a couple weeks ago. Man, they're a very talented group. Their record doesn't do them justice, that's for sure. That's not to say, Oklahoma State went down there and did not play good. From the very beginning, it just was not good. There wasn't a whole lot that went their way from, you got turnovers, you got the weather, you've got all kinds of stuff working against you. And granted, they had to play in the same stuff, so that's not an excuse. But there just wasn't a whole lot going well for Oklahoma State on Saturday.
Nope, not at all. And one of the things that I thought Oklahoma State should have done, I think one of the things that's been a key for them is that OSU in all these games they played so well, and they've scored on their very first possession, right? And not only that first possession seems like they've always had the ball first. That gave them the lead, and or they stopped the other team defensively. But I felt like, hey, UCF, no doubt about it, the best part of their team was their offense. John Rice Plumlee, he came back in the OU game, played well there, but he's squarely settled into that offense. R.J. Harvey is an NFL running back. Kobe Hudson and Javon Baker, those are both NFL receivers. And this is scheme from Gus Malzahn that we know is really good in the run game. I felt like, I mentioned it last week, Chase, that if Oklahoma State went down 2 scores in the third quarter, I thought it probably would have went downhill from there, because then you have to get in a throw-a-thon. You can't huddle up, play your tempo game, that kind of thing. So having said all that, I think OSU needed to think a little bit more outside the box, in the sense that I think they should have taken the ball when they won the toss and got the ball and tried to score first.
I don't disagree with you. They've seen a lot of success and with their offense on the first drive. Usually, if they can go down the field and score, it kind of sets the tone for the game. And it's not a very popular thing to go ahead and take the ball first, but that's really what has worked for them so far.
Mm-hmm.
Being the first team to score, letting their offense, Ollie and Bowman, kind of set the tone for how the game's going to go. And then you got Rashad Owens, you got Vernon Presley, you've got all these guys on offense. I think that I kind of agree, if they would have taken the ball first and kind of said, this is what we're going to do and this is how the game's going to go, maybe it goes a little bit different, maybe it doesn't. But it seemed like just from the start, it just was not a pretty football game.
Yeah, what do you think about Ollie?
Man, I don't know. I'm not going to hold it against him. If you go back and you kind of watch the game.
Was I too hard on him on social media when I said that your best player can't be the biggest emotional roller coaster?
I don't think so. I think that, being – and he's a young kid, man. He's 19 years old, 20 at the most. He's still got a lot of growing to do. And I don't think that you're out of line for saying that by any means, but he is young. He's still learning. He's a kid. And all of this, it seems like all of this attention, not only from, a national standpoint, but now, he's by far the biggest guy on campus. It's not even close. And I think that's a lot to take in, when you're 19 years old. It's a lot to embrace, and it's, you're doing interviews with ESPN and they're talking about the Heisman and they're talking about all this different stuff. So I feel like there is so much pressure on him that I kind of understand it. If that makes sense. I'm kind of, playing devil's advocate and trying to speak from his perspective. That is a lot to take in, especially just within a few weeks. There wasn't near as much pressure when he was putting up these 150, 200-yard games. And now it's like if you take the conditions into consideration, Oklahoma State couldn't throw the football. It was pouring.
They did early.
No, they could early, and I think they had to have a healthy dose of that and able to, and this is with any run game, to have an effective run game. If you're able to balance out the pass and the run, they have to account for Bowman. But in the entire game, it seemed like they had five guys down the line, and then they had their two backers. That is,
two safeties ready to come up and fit their alley. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you're hat on hat. With your front five. With your front five linemen, if not, 6, if you count the tight end, you're hat on hat with those guys. And even if you have the 2 H-backs in there, it's hard to get a hat on all 7 guys that are in the box. So like I said, I'm not holding it a bad game again. I mean, it was a bad game all around. I think that he's capable of more. I think he knows that he's capable of more. And I think that's why you see the frustration come out. And like I said, the pressure that's been applied over these past couple weeks, it's a lot for a 19-year-old kid to handle.
He likes it, though. I mean, he strikes the pose.
He does.
He needs it.
He does. I personally, and people may differ, I like to see a little bit of emotion out of it.
Oh, I love it.
I think that shows the expectation that he has for himself and it has for his team. And I'm all for it. When you score a touchdown, be excited, get the guys around you excited. And when you struggle, and I'll go into a baseball perspective here. As a pitcher, if you're having the game of your life, strut off the mound, dude. Have a blast. When you suck, you better be ready to, just take it, because you have to. With the position that he's put himself in, he's the face of Oklahoma State football. So he has to know how to really accept failure, and that's a hard thing to do.
You don't necessarily have to accept it, but you do need to move on from it.
Right.
And not dwell on it.
And learn how to deal with it is what I mean. Not necessarily be okay with it. But like I said, that's a hard thing to learn. You learn that 1, 2, 3 years into college, and maybe this was the game that maybe humbled him a little bit, and heads down, chins down, time to go back to work.
My suggestion there would be, hey, you're a running back, which means that the other team can shut you down. The other team can put as many guys as they want in the box, and they can stop you. So, hey, the offense has to take what the defense gives them, right? So Ollie is going to be relied upon the rest of the offense and what they can do to alleviate. If there's 7 guys in the box, you got to throw the ball like Oklahoma State did early. I thought Alan Bowman came out early in the game, and actually I thought the first 2 or 3 possessions he was fantastic throwing the ball. Then when the rain hit, and then it just was kind of a combination of everything. It was the rain hitting, plus Oklahoma State was losing, which meant you kind of got in a scramble mode. And then also, once UCF got a substantial lead, they knew OSU was going to have to throw the ball every down. So now they're back. One time they dropped their linebacker and man coverage with 2 safeties behind it. You can blitz. You can literally call every play on defense based on knowing the other team's going to pass the ball, and that makes it twice as hard to do so offensively. So I think that kind of perfect storm just all kind of hit OSU Saturday.
Yeah, and that's exactly how Coach Benny referred to it. It was the perfect storm. That you get down 14-0, and then it's pouring. I mean, pouring. You can barely see. Sitting at home, I can barely see some of the plays that are happening because of how hard the rain was coming down. And those are some high quality cameras, so it is pouring. It's really hard to throw a wet football. It's heavier. It's slippery. And then on top of that, when the defense knows that's what you have to do.
Yes, that makes
it's essentially game over. You know what I'm saying? And then with how effective and how good Central Florida's run game was, good grief, man. I mentioned his name, John Rice Plumlee he is a stud. He is really, really, really good. Not only with his legs, but he made some. The very first play of the game throws an absolute dime. He is a great quarterback. And I truly think if they have him all season, I think they're one of the teams that's possibly competing for a spot in Arlington.
Well, it was about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Every single Oklahoma State fan was marking this UCF game down as a loss, and probably a substantial loss. So,
yeah, I mean
that was just a little over a month ago.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I think them losing him really, really, really hurt them. And they have really good. I mean, they have really good skill players, really good skill players. But when you don't have a guy that necessarily
better than Oklahoma State has right now, I think, without the 3 top receivers.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. Like I said, when you don't have a guy that's necessarily as advanced in distributing the ball and then also using his legs to help the team out, losing a quarterback itself hurts. But when you lose a quarterback of that talent and that tier, that really hurts.
You saw last year with Spencer Sanders.
Yeah,
when you lose a guy that literally creates all your offense between his legs and his arm, it's just so hard to replace that guy.
Then that's a great example. I haven't even really thought about that, but. Like I said, I think that if he's healthy and he plays for the full season, I truly think that there may be a 1 or 2 loss team at the most.
Yeah. They're going to be one of the powers moving forward, too, because of the recruiting grounds that they have to get to. Okay, so Alan Bowman, I think this was probably his worst game. I think there's reasons why you could say that would be. Don't mean that to be critical. Don't mean that to throw him under the bus. Hey, man, if you're going to talk about the good, like we do a lot here at OState Daily, right? You got to mention the bad, too. You got to call a spade a spade. I mean, I think you'd be the first one to tell you that this was probably his worst game of the year, passing the ball. Had three turnovers. Not all of them were on him. I mean, they were tips, but I still think even the tips were probably passes he would admit that weren't great passes by him. And so, it's hard, when you go on the road and they're able to stack the box and then your quarterback starts not playing as well as he's capable of playing, and then you're down 3 receivers, and then, boy, you just defensively, of all the things that happened, I mentioned this in the highlight show, the one thing I think that Oklahoma State, that the reason why they lost the most was that our secondary, our corners and our safeties, we couldn't match up against their receivers because you had to at least go hat for hat in the box to stop the read option game because, with John Rice Plumlee, R.J. Harvey, they threaten both sides of the line of scrimmage. So you need to have a guy on the backside. You need to have hat for hat on the front side. So you can't just bring up safeties to play run or, drop safeties into the pass game because if you do that, UCF is just going to run for 500 yards on you. So you had to be balanced defensively in terms of defending the run and defending the pass, which meant Oklahoma State was going to have to put its corners on islands. There were going to be one-on-one matchups all day. If Oklahoma State wins those matchups, we probably were able to, you saw us starting to fit the run a little bit better. But UCF's receivers defeated our secondary all day long, and because of that, we just simply couldn't get adjusted their offense.
Yeah,
I thought that was the biggest key.
I agree. I think that was a big role. One thing that I did notice offensively, it didn't seem like there was there wasn't as much creativity, and what I mean by that is there wasn't near as much motion as you've seen the past 4 or 5 weeks. There wasn't near as much moving around. I mean, it seemed like a very simplified version of the offense, and I'm not sure why. I mean, you have the rain and all that stuff, but what's stopping you from running the motion? What's stopping you from maybe helping Bowman out in terms of getting reads on defenses? I mean, because you can tell a lot as a quarterback, whether it's man or zone or whatever. Mm-hmm. You could probably even get a cover 1, cover 2, whatever, just with a simple motion, and there wasn't.
We've done a lot of that lately, yeah.
Right, and there wasn't much of that this week. So that was where I was a little bit frustrated. On top of we're getting our butt kicked and we just look like hammered dog crap.
I think Chase, you're talking about a defense that was stopping the run. They were doing everything to stop. I think OSU knew what they got on the back and they got man coverage. I don't think they needed motion to figure that out. It was not going to be a secret. UCF was going to put everybody in the box. They were going to play man coverage on the back. You didn't need motion to figure that out. That would be my counter.
That's fair. But I also think that motion allows for guys like Brennan Presley, who's one of the fastest guys on the field, anytime that he steps on the field, that may get him a step or two.
But see, we did it once on a third down play, and they ran it down. Remember that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That was.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No, I understand for sure. That was just one thing that I noticed watching the game that there wasn't as much of that I'd seen a ton of against Kansas State, a ton against Kansas, a lot against West Virginia, and a ton against OU. And it was effective. So I don't know why you would necessarily go away from it.
I think OSU felt like they could go in there and run the ball, and they could throw their little hitches. They could throw their mesh routes. They could throw their slants. And I think they thought they could score 30 to 38 points on that UCF defense as long as they just didn't make mistakes. So you dumb it down, you simplify it, you make it to where, hey, let's at the very least, let's just go and run her off. Don't make any mistakes. Let's not have stupid penalties. Let's not do something that's going to create a penalty. And let's just go first down by first down and score 35 points. I think that probably was the mentality going in because UCF had been so bad against the run. Yeah,
and their UCF's, entire game plan was stop the run. I mean, that was it. That was all they had to do, especially once the rain started coming down. All they had to do was focus on stopping zero. That was it.
If you're going to be a good team, better than a good team, what Oklahoma State wants OSU to be, what they have been, you got to be more than just Ollie Gordon.
Yeah.
You can't just say, hey, we're one guy.
Right.
You got to have Brendan Presley, who's a big-time playmaker like he's been, and Rashad Owens. Leon Johnson has to come up big. When you're back up running, when Jaden Nixon comes in, he's got to bust off a 20-some-odd-yard run like he did against K-State out there, Kansas, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. So it can't just be the Ollie Gordon show.
Right, and I don't know, man. I'm frustrated. It's taking me back to Saturday, and I don't want to go back to Saturday.
Yeah.
I just
fuel to the fire, brother.
You have to make those adjustments. If you see that, crap, our simplified game plan is not working, you've got to go back to what's gotten you 5 or 6 wins in a row against really good teams. And teams that I think. Yeah, probably 2 of them are better than UCF. That and Kansas State and OU. I think UCF should run through the rest of them. But you go and beat those two teams with this offense that we've run. Then you go and simplify it against UCF. You go in the locker room at halftime, and we've got to get back to what we're doing. It's simple for me to say because I'm not coaching. But then they went right down the field first possession of the second half and got right down to the 10-yard line and stalled a little bit because, hey, of all people, Brendan Presley just drops a pass that probably would have got him down to about the 3-yard line. Yeah, and I would have to go back and watch it because I'm curious to see did they have a little bit more movement on that?
They had a little more tempo, I think they did. Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing that I liked was you're down big at half, and you come back out the first drive after halftime, and you drive it right down the field. Like I said weeks before, this team doesn't quit. They don't stop. And if you look at the scoreboard, you may think that they did, but I personally, I don't think that there was ever a time where they're just like, we're done. We give up, we roll over, white flag, let's go home. Let's get on the first flight out of here. Let's just get back. I didn't see a whole lot of that out of the team, the collective team. Maybe a few individual plays from a few individual players. I couldn't even tell you. But as a group as a whole, I didn't see that rollover fetal position pose.
Yeah. This as well as anybody that knows me, Chase. I'm not one that's bought into the culture talk. I've always thought that culture talk just kind of meant, hey, that means we can go get 3-star guys, not have to work very hard in recruiting because those guys, those are the easier ones to get to OSU, so you don't go get a 5-star, have them leave you at the altar. Now you're scrambling. I've always just kind of thought that culture talk was kind of a cop-out in the sense that, hey, that means that we have a cap, that we can only be this good, get these type of kids here, that kind of thing. But I do think it's real this year. You mentioned that with these kids. I think the culture on this team is simply fantastic. And because of that, I think they're going to bounce right back. I don't think this loss is going to affect them at all. I just think it was an off day. It was a bad day. I think they probably showed up Sunday everything was, hey, fuel to the fire, whatever, and moved right on to Houston. I really think they're going to do that.
I do too, and we've seen this team face adversity before. With the loss against South Alabama and then the close one to Iowa State. Then they come back and beat, they get a bye week, and then they come back and they beat Kansas State, who was ranked high at the time, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go on this, just almost jaw-dropping 4 or 5 week span.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, if you looked, they were talking about this. Oklahoma State was, I think the betting thing was like 6.5 wins.
Yeah.
Like, are they gonna get to 6.5 wins?
I don't know which one I would have taken after the South Alabama. I would have taken the under after South Alabama.
After South Alabama, yes. I think before the season, I was going to go over. I think they were undersold. But at the same time, I think that
even though that you had no idea who the quarterback was going to be, you had no idea who the running. I mean, you did, but
well, I thought I did. I thought I knew what was going to happen, and then
did you think it was going to be Gunnar Gundy?
Yes and no. That's who. One of our first talks. I think that was who my favorite was, and that was because there was no. It didn't seem like there was a run threat with the other two quarterbacks, which I think in today's game of football, I think a running quarterback is kind of the way people are trending, and I think is a little bit harder to defend because you have to account for the legs. And then, Gunnar played a really good first 3 weeks.
In some ways, I like OSU's offense the way Bowman runs it better than I did the way Spencer Sanders ran it. I trust it more.
No, I agree.
In some ways.
It's simple. It's more simple, and I don't mean that. It's you're either going to do this or this. There's no in between, I guess you could say. There's not it's a simplified offense for the quarterback. He's not having to read as much. He's not having to, okay, crap, do I pull and then do I throw? Do I pull and I run? There's a whole lot that goes into that. Like I said, I thought after watching the first 3 weeks it was going to be Gunnar Gundy. But then again, after the first 3 weeks when they lose to South Alabama, I'm like, oh, crap, we may be in trouble. We may be in trouble. Then they go to Iowa State and they lose, and it's just like, oh, my gosh, it's going to be a long season, and then they pull this off. And I'll say it again, it's been a phenomenal job by the coaching staff to get what they have out of this team. I think that they have already overachieved what a lot of people thought they would achieve.
Well, my comment, and whenever we had the conversation about the quarterbacks after the South Alabama game, you'll remember I said, hey, it needs to be Alan Bowman. And the reason why it needs to be Alan Bowman is I think, he has the ability to pass the ball well enough to get you to 7 wins. Mm-hmm. So you get to 7 wins, you use this just kind of as a bridge to Zane Flores, and you move on from there. And my reasoning there from that perspective was, hey, from what I've seen of Alan Bowman, if Gunnar Gundy and Garrett Rangel can't beat that out, then they are not the future at Oklahoma State. That's kind of the way I was looking at that. Zane Flores, at that point, in my opinion, would be the future of Oklahoma State or whoever else you recruit back in. So, hey, take the guy who's the most ready at this very second, try to get to 7 wins, then turn it over to your most talented quarterback on campus, which is most likely Zane Flores. That was kind of my thinking.
Yeah, and with the way that college football is trending, that's what you have to do. There's not a whole lot of a developmental stage, if you will. I think that looking back, and obviously you were right when you said that Alan Bowman needs to be the guy. I don't want to look at it like this.
Well, you don't know what the record would be with Rangel or Gundy. Well,
right.
You might be undefeated. Who knows? I mean,
you're kind of on a year-to-year thing at this point. It's not like a and I hope Zane Flores comes in and he is the starter, or the guy that they just got a commitment from out of California that's supposed to be an absolute stud.
3-star pro style quarterback. I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah,
he's supposed to be good.
It's a hard name to say. It's a hard name to say. I don't even know how to read it or whatever. He's supposed to be, I think he's 3 or 4 star guy. Supposed to be a really talented kid. But I'm curious to see what they do in the portal this year. Do they go after another quarterback? Obviously, I want to see who enters the portal. You know, is Rangel going to leave? I don't think Gunner's going to leave. You know, what's going to happen?
I think if Rangel or Gunner stays, that gives you the ability to not have to get a quarterback in the portal. Maybe. I mean, you need 3 to 4 quarterbacks. Don't get me wrong. It'd be interesting to see what Rangel and Gunner does, though.
Yeah, I'm curious. I don't think Gunner's going to leave simply because, you know, he's grown up in Stillwater.
Yeah, that'd be interesting if he did.
It would, and I think that he could go to a mid-major Division I and probably walk in and be the guy. You know, I think that of him and Rangel. I think Rangel could go to a mid-major and be a guy too. It just kind of all depends on what they want. You know, are they okay with fighting for a position, or do they want to walk in and be the guy? Which
I don't think they'll have that situation anywhere, though.
And when I say walk in and be the guy, I think that they go in and not necessarily from day one they're going to say this is our starter, but I do think they would be the starter
eventually. Yeah.
I mean, because they're good quarterbacks. That, you know, they're young. They haven't developed yet, and I think that more could be done with that. But like I said, now with the way college football is trending, there's not a whole lot of time for that. You know, you've got to go get your best. And if somebody crazy enters the portal this year, that's a starter at, you know, say, heck, I don't know.
Caleb Williams?
Mississippi State. That ain't going to happen. And I don't know who Mississippi State has. I'm just using it as an example. If Mississippi State starter enters the portal and comes to Oklahoma State, he probably is going to be your guy. You know, he has experience. He probably has the tools to be successful. You know, he's SEC quarterback, all that stuff. I'm really curious to see what happens. You know, I think it's exciting, but I also really want to see this Zane Flores, and I want to see the 2024 kid that they just got committed.
Yep, and hey, Rangel, I've complimented him every time he's played. He throws a nice ball. He runs. It kind of reminds me of a Clint Shelf type of guy. Maybe not quite as much speed, but that style of quarterback. We've seen Gunner Gundy. Yeah. So okay, let's move on to Houston. My two dogs in the background. They've been playing all day long, so I hope they hold on. They're waiting for Daddy to take them for a walk. So that's the mode we're in right now. So let's move on to Houston. What are you thinking?
Man, I said it 2 weeks ago. You're going to get everybody's best shot from now on. All Houston has to work for is Dan Holgerson is fighting for his job at this point. I think if he loses the last 2-3 games or whatever, he probably doesn't have a job next year. So they're fighting for that. They're fighting for, you know, all they can do now is ruin Oklahoma State's season in terms of getting to the Big 12 championship game. And it's another dangerous game because this is another newcomer into the Big 12. They want to beat the teams that have been in the Big 12. They want to make a name for themselves. There's a lot that they have to fight for. And now Oklahoma State has this loss, so I think that they're going to come out fired up, ready to go, and realize that, I mean, if they can score 60 on Houston and they can score 70 on BYU, that's what they're going to do, and that's what they need to do. So I do think there's a little bit more gas on the fire in terms of going into this week as opposed to last week when you're coming off a huge win against Oklahoma. But they can't go out and lay an egg. You know, anybody that you play in the Big 12 is capable of beating you at any time. And I'm not. Should they? No. But they're capable of doing so. They're all Division I football players. They're all Power 5 football players. And they're good athletes, you know, and they want to win just as bad as you do, whether you're wearing orange or wearing red. You know, it doesn't matter. Both teams want to win. And, I mean, it's going to come down to who wants it more, in my opinion.
Yeah, and who executes. Of the biggest silver linings of all silver linings, the mother of all silver linings here, Chase, last week's game was so bad, it was almost like having a week off. I mean, it didn't seem taxing on the players. It just seemed like by about the third quarter, it was just kind of a let's go through the motions type thing. You know, if that would have been, say, like a 45-42 game that it's just rocking back and forth and it's like 90 plays apiece. In some ways, I think the fact that OSU got beat as bad as they did probably saved a little bit of energy and maybe freshened some things up. But is that just way too silver lining-ish?
I don't think so. I think that one thing that I forgot to point out when we were talking about Ollie is Ollie wasn't 100% going into this game. There's no way.
Which is why OSU needs to find spots whenever they can to not run him all the time.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about this, I think it was going into Cincinnati. I wanted to see him carry the ball about half as many times as he did because I knew he was going to have a really heavy load against Oklahoma. He had a really heavy load against West Virginia. He had a really heavy load against Kansas State. That's taxing on a guy. And then he goes down against OU. He's not 100% healthy, and I think it's on maybe the second or third drive of the game. He goes down again at UCF. His body and the wear and tear that he's taking is alarming, and it's kind of scary. And this is kind of what I was afraid of with how much they were using him. And I'm all for it. He's the hot hand. He's your best back by far. But at the same time, you've got to save him. You've got to help him out a little bit in terms of getting him off his feet and getting him some rest and stuff like that. And I think that they did a good job of taking him out when they did against Central Florida. One, because he was beat up, and two, I mean, the game. Let's face it, the game was over. The game was over. So I was glad to see that they took him out, and I hope that, they probably saved him 10, 15 carries, and that's 10 or 15, 20, 30 hits that he's taken or bouncing off guys or whatever. So hopefully that rejuvenates him a little bit, and he's good to go in Houston. But that's one thing that I did want to mention was going into this week, he was not 100%. There's no way.
100%. Hey, we're just about out of time here, Chase. We did not get to our grades. Okay, and
bad.
We just want to leave it at that. Do we want to go through the grades?
We can
have at it if you want.
Let's do it. Just for the fun of it. Hopefully, it'll create.
Let's just do offense, defense, and coaching. Let's start with the offense.
The offensive coaching.
Just offense. We'll do the coaching last. Offense.
Offense, C-.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, 3 turnovers, something like that? Scored 3 points against the team that was like one of the worst teams in the United States of America stopping the run?
I think C- just because I don't want to overreact.
Sure.
I can't take away Bowman's first 1 or 2 drives where he's throwing 100%. You could go to C- to D+. High 68 or whatever, percentage-wise. It was not a good game, but it wasn't a complete fail in my opinion.
See, the way you have to give a grade, in my opinion, for something like that is you have to grade them based on what you think they're capable of doing. Mm-hmm. And I think Oklahoma State was capable of scoring 35, 40, 45 points on that team. So from that perspective, I'll just say, hey, OSU should play better offense than they did Saturday, even if it was raining. I hate to just give them an F, but whatever grade you need to give them, just to say that they should have done better. Let's give them that grade. They should have done better grade. Okay, so defense.
Defense, good grief. And I don't. It's a D game. I don't want to take away from Plumlee, and I don't want to take away from how good their athletes are and their skill players are. But it was so bad. It was terrible. Just getting completely torched over the top.
Tackling wasn't real good.
No, 50-50 balls. UCF won every single 50-50 ball. Not only did they throw it all over us, but they ran it down our throat. It was just a bad football game.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think the defense was a lot closer than what people think. Hey, we had people in position to make plays in the pass game, just didn't play the ball. You had positions, you had front 7 guys in position to make plays in the run game, and so it seemed like either you weren't in the right spot, and they got like they formation just a couple of times pretty good, but then you got it lined down in formation right, and then you just missed a tackle. Mm-hmm. Well, then you did that, then they would pull it, and then you'd have a guy in position in the pass game, and then you just wouldn't make a play. It just kind of seemed like at every single level of the defense, you were close, but just every single 50-50 type thing that could have happened, UCF won, whether that have been breaking a tackle like we saw R.J. Harvey do several different times, or whether it be just tilting the field properly like they did with that trip set, or whether it be, a couple of the passes we saw. So defensively, just watching it and evaluating, how it went down, I felt like, that the getting in position to make plays was like a B. I mean, Oklahoma State was there to, and this is a tough defense just to get guys in the right spot, because they're trying to make you run over here, then they're going over there, right? I really thought that Coach Nardo did a good job of getting his kids in the right spot. I thought he had the exact right schemes. It's just I didn't think we executed worth a darn in the wrong spot. So from that perspective,
I think you sold me on your grade right there. I mean, I'll go with you on that, because when you think about it, when I mentioned the 50-50 balls and stuff like that, we were in position to probably make a play. We just didn't. We just didn't.
And those kids are young, man. Those are young kids in the back end. I know Trey Rucker's not. Daniels has been around, but most of those guys that are covering, they're trying to cover NFL receivers with college experience, and they are young.
Yeah.
And things weren't going good. So, hey, man, I am not going to in any way, shape, or form go negative on this defense. I love Coach Nardo. I love what he's doing. I love the scheme. I love the young players. I love the energy they play with. Just wasn't a good day. You know that I like Alan Bowman. I love our receivers. Love Ollie Gordon. Our offensive line has been fantastic. Honestly, I mean, hey, we've had to have a real talk about this. We've had to talk about all the things that went wrong, which if you talk about things that go wrong, it sounds like you're being negative.
Yeah.
Don't want to be that way. Hey, I'm super pumped about these last two games. I'm super pumped about where Oklahoma State football is at right now. And so, hey, this was just a bad game. Move on. Let's go beat Houston. Let's go 2-0 here to finish the season. And let's get ourselves in the championship game, which, with the clarifications and all that, who knows what the heck's going to happen with all the tiebreakers. But I do think if OSU wins both games, I think that the largest odds out there by a lot would favor OSU being in.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And some of the tie-breaking rules are whoever wrote those needs to be fired.
Yeah, did you see my article?
Yes. I mean, whoever wrote the tiebreaker rules needs to be fired. I mean, those are terrible rules. And they're really hard to follow,
yeah.
By the way.
Well, apparently they couldn't even follow them because they were like, oh, well, yeah, it's this. Well, no, hold on a minute. That doesn't make sense. So then that was one of those deals.
Yeah, and when it comes down to like the uncommon opponent, why does the uncommon opponent matter?
Yeah.
I mean, what the heck?
Yeah.
You're gonna. I don't know. OU didn't play Baylor or anything like that, but like you're gonna give OU Baylor, and then you've got OSU playing West Virginia or something.
Yeah.
I mean, just something stupid. But no, the tiebreaker rules are dumb. But I'm with you. If they go 2-0. I'm pretty confident that you're going to see them in Arlington, probably against a really good Texas team.
Yep. Hey, I got to get, Chase, I know you got to get too. I got to grill some hamburgers for my beautiful wife, who was the teacher of the month for Guthrie High School. So super excited about that. Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right, man. Hey, we'll talk to you. Well, we'll be communicating way more before next week. Before our podcast, be talking to you next week.
Sounds good, man.
All right, go Pokes.
Yes, sir.
See you, man.
See you. Have a good one.
Okay.